Welcome to Attention Retention with Jackie McManus, your source for the latest trends in transportation recruitment and retention.
On today's podcast of Attention Retention, I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome Andrew Winkler, Chief General Manager from Chief Carriers. Andrew, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thanks for joining me.
Well, it's about time.
That's right. You were actually the guy that inspired me to start my own podcast.
Yeah, who knew, right? I think we both thought, why would we want to do a podcast? But now we're seeing the light. So
yeah, we are. Definitely take some time, but we are seeing the light towards the end of the tunnel, which is nice. And you and I have known each other for multiple years throughout the industry and become long time, better friends. Yep. Recently, which has been really fun getting to know you and your wife, Tracy. And I have to say this, you lead one of the most impressive companies out there in the industry. And personally, you have such a commitment to creating an honest, transparent, driver-centric workforce. And that's one of the reasons, among others, that Chief Carriers won Best Fleets to Drive For 3 consecutive years in a row. And in 2023, your team was named overall Best Fleets to Drive For the small carrier category. And it's a remarkable achievement.
Well, thanks. It's it's taken a lot of years to get there and a lot of years in the industry, but at some point you learn when you start taking care of the people first and you put people first, then everything else kind of follows in business. And we know there's a lot of companies out there yet maybe haven't got that far yet. Yep. They're still leading in other ways and stuff, but man, it's fun when you can just do the right thing for people and see where that takes your company.
Yeah. And that's a very extensive process from what I understand in becoming chosen to be, even the top 20 best fleets to drive for, because it's the feedback directly from your drivers.
Yeah. It's what's neat about that program is that, we can all, as carriers, we can go out there and brag and, about all the great things in the programs we have. But the way Carriers Edge does that is there's a validation process at the end where you got to survey so many of your drivers that basically come back and say, yeah, these guys do everything they say they do. So that's what makes it special. And the fact that you have to be nominated by a driver in the first place to get in. Yeah,
it's really, at that point, it's really putting into showcase, besides for just all the advertisements, blasting how great your company is, it really comes down to the drivers who are working for your team. And it's, again, a remarkable achievement. But Andrew, could you share a little bit with the audience about yourself and your journey to becoming GM for Chief Carriers?
Yeah, so going way back, I actually started as a student driver in 1995. So let's date myself just a little bit. Only drove over the road for about a year. And then I was asked into the dispatch office of the company I was with at the time. And they're also a best fleet to drive for, Grand Island Express. So I spent 23 years with them, which they're a fantastic organization as well. And for the last 5 years, I've been with Chief Carriers. It was just simply an opportunity to step in as a GM and essentially run my own truck line. So it was just more of an opportunity than anything. And then as you spend so much time with a great carrier like GIX, you've learned a lot of things over the years, and how am I going to bring some of that with me, and how am I going to put my own spin on things? And, it takes a little bit of time to kind of rebuild. When you walk into a new company, you just never know what you're quite walking into. But thankfully, in just a matter of a few years, we've been able to find our way towards the top. So
that's amazing. And I have to ask, many of our customers, I'd say about 50%, the executive leadership, they have their CDL, and some of them still maintain it. What impact do you think that has as far as being able to, have your CDL? We're a CDL driver and actually doing the work itself. What impact does that have in how you manage and lead your team?
Well, first of all, I think it gives you a lot more credit, or street credit, maybe with the drivers themselves. Yeah. And it's one of my favorite things to do. So we'll see classes come through maybe twice a month from the local community college. So instead of sending a recruiter to them, we say, hey, why don't you guys come see us? Come look at our operation, meet some of the team, just kind of get a feel for how we operate. but I usually spend 10 or 15 minutes with the class and just introduce myself, tell them about where I came from. And the moment that I share with them that I was in your shoes 25, 30 years ago, their eyes light up like, oh man. And I think for a lot of them, they want to drive now, they want to get into the industry, but they may not always want to drive. So to see what you can do in the industry itself and how you can progress, I think it's inspiring to them.
I do too. And, a big thing that we speak about is about building a career path from,
right.
The warehouse worker to at 18 years old, so that we can get them out of whatever situation they're in at 21 to get their CDL. And with, the right person, if they want to go into recruiting, go into operation, go into sales, and with the right carrier that they're working with, the world's kind of your oyster. I mean, trucking's not really going anywhere anytime soon, right?
It'll be here.
It's here, right? And the career paths that are available for the younger generation to also learn about the industry and then get that promotion within the company. There's just such a big opportunity for so many young people to get involved, and not just as a CDL driver, but start there and learn the industry. That's always the best way with any industry you're in. So I love your story. It's so great to hear that and how it kind of transpires back to your company. But let's talk about the 3 R's, which are recruitment, retention, and recognition. So what would you say, what role does company culture play in attracting and retaining drivers for you?
It's bigger than most people think or even understand. And I kind of go back to some of my earlier years in management, and I think about the recruiting aspect of it, and specifically marketing. I thought I understood marketing. I probably really didn't at the time, but for years and years, it seems like you tried to get on with these agencies that say, hey, we know how to recruit drivers. We can get your drivers in. And so the challenge with recruiting and marketing and trucking is that you spend a lot of dollars on this stuff.
Yes.
And it's hard to find the ROI sometimes in marketing. And what I always was told, or what I remember keep seeing, is like, well, these marketing companies would come back to you and say, hey, look how many impressions we got you last month for your money.
Right.
And I'm going, big deal. I don't even know what an impression is, and I don't care because I still have empty seats.
Yeah.
And, just probably recently over the last, I'll call it 4 or 5 years, we've had we got into marketing strategy, and we came across a marketing partner in Omaha that actually talked strategy with us, and they took time to explain things. And, it was kind of that aha moment for me. All of a sudden I did start to understand marketing and how everything ties together, when you're talking websites and podcasts and paid ads and all those things. So,
and having the same message across all platforms, that's consistent.
Yep.
And being able to highlight that culture, I think, is really where, we're seeing from where we sit, better qualified candidates that are going to clients versus just the masses of candidates, right? It's really about looking at what are the quality candidates and are they a good fit for our team. What would you say is like one of the more successful approaches that you and your company do to recruit top talent?
Well, what's interesting is I think, first of all, you have to have a culture in your company. Everybody's got a culture, but you have to have a positive culture for the drivers to see. And once you establish what that looks like, and I think of Best Fleets and some things like that and kind of the path that steered us down. But once you have that path, then you got to learn how to tell your story. And that's really when the marketing comes in. So if you've got a great culture, you need to tell your story. And a lot of companies, I think there's some that have good cultures, but don't know how to tell their story.
Yeah.
But once you start to put all that together, all of a sudden it starts to pay off. And it's not a fast process. And that was probably my biggest issue, was I'm a little bit impatient. I'm spending these dollars. Where's the drivers?
Well, you're in the trucking industry. We're all impatient.
Yeah, right. So, but it's amazing. Once you get the pipeline filled and you get things rolling and stuff, it really all does come together.
Yeah. It really is more of a holistic approach when it comes to marketing and
Yes.
specifically within trucking, other industries, the finance, the tech industry, they're all over it as far as the holistic strategy. And we are seeing more and more companies adopt that. And with that, they are seeing that success. I want to jump over to retention. What strategies have proven to be most effective in keeping employees, specifically drivers, engaged, loyal, and passionate, especially they're out on the road every day by themselves?
Yes.
What has worked and what has room for improvement?
Well, you have to remain connected to them. And I know a lot of companies get it. We're on social media all the time. You've got your public pages and we've got a couple different private pages. But that's important that on the private page and Facebook, I share a lot more stuff with the drivers and the rest of the team than I ever probably would on the public page.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's a connection. And it's, whether it's a weekly video, hey, here's what's going on behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you have to control that stuff, because if you don't get out in front of these things and be transparent and tell everybody where you're going, why you're doing this, they're going to make it up. They're going to make up the reason why you're doing that. That's probably not the reason you want floating around out there.
And that's human nature, right? What you don't know, you make up.
Yeah.
And that's
I'm sure it's
very
that way in every industry. So
absolutely. And so I think, and through the pandemic, one silver lining is that many companies have adopted technology and they're online. And in a way, it has transformed the industry because we are keeping our drivers more up to date on the good, the not so good. And a big piece that you always talk about is having that open line of communication with drivers. Specifically when you meet with drivers, when they first join chief carriers, as an executive, you meet with them and you make it a point to meet with them for 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes. What role and what role does that play, do you think, full circle and overall retaining the driver?
Well, the first thing I do, I meet with every new orientation class, the first day of orientation.
Yeah.
And the real purpose of that is talking about safety and talking about, we look at safety as a core value here, and it is one of our 4 core values at Chief. So that's important. I want to set the record straight. I want them to understand that we don't compromise safety for any reason ever. And I want them to hear it from me, so they know, if something ever comes up down the road, they could relay it back to me or tell somebody that something wasn't right. And the second core value I usually talk about is a passion for people. So I want them to know that, and beyond the drivers knowing that, it's important that your entire staff knows and understands those core values and how you operate your business. So the passion for people one is about taking care of your people, regardless of the issue, the problem, whatever. And that's a hard one to do. And I think there's probably a lot of companies out there that don't look at it like that. They operate their business by the policy manual, and the dispatchers that are on the front line is they know the policy book up and down, and that's how they do it. But that's critical when you're dealing with different situations every day. Those policies aren't always going to fit that particular situation for that driver. So you need to give your people the freedom just to do the right thing to take care of your people. Once your drivers see that and they understand that, though, that they worry a lot less, and they know, hey, it's trucking. We got up and downs, every week, every month and stuff. So, but my company's behind me, and whatever happens, they're going to help take care of me.
And what's really interesting about that point? I'm on the radio with Tim Wrigley, Sirius XM, and it's an opportunity for me to talk to drivers and to learn exactly what's keeping them at a certain carrier, how long they've been at a certain carrier. And what always is the common theme is that transparency, and they feel taken care of by the company, regardless of pay. And that's what's so interesting to me is that, yes, is it always nice to make more money? Absolutely. Recently, I was talking to a driver yesterday, and he actually, he had the grass is greener, and he fully admitted it. And he went to another carrier, and he was just a number. And barely knew his name, didn't know his wife, and he went back to the other carrier. It was a smaller carrier, probably around 200 drivers, and they welcomed him back in. They were like, "We had a feeling you'd be back." And really, what it came down to, though, is the fact that the driver knew, exactly, who is in charge, how what they expected, an expectation from the carrier and from the driver, and also what that communication would look like. And they felt valued. And that is something, that word feeling valued, like it's such a gray word. There's so many different angles that you can go into it. How often do you and your team keep in contact with your drivers when they're out on the road?
Well, I think that's, the driver managers and the people that are on the front lines and stuff, they're talking to them constantly and stuff like that. It's hard these days,
Totally.
in our fleet, the drivers are out usually 2 weeks at a time before they go home and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we're irregular route carriers, so they're not always coming through the terminals and stuff. So you have to make extra efforts to stay in contact. It's not like you're going to see those drivers every other day or once a week even. So that's where the extra effort comes in with maybe the social media and the videos and different things like that.
Yeah. I could tell you this, when I started the business, Andrew, 10 years ago, it was 10 years in May, and I started talking about Facebook and social media, everyone was looking at me cross-eyed. Why in this industry? Why? But I'm so happy to see that that's been adopted throughout our industry. And what we find when companies or drivers are looking for new employment, not only are they going to the website, they're also going to the Facebook page. And yeah.
It's not just one thing when they're checking you out. So that's when we were talking about like paid advertisements and your advertising recruiting for drivers and stuff, that's just their first stop. They're going to your Facebook page, they're going to Google reviews, they're doing all those things. So when you get drivers in and they, say, hey, what made you choose Chief? There's a lot of choices out there and stuff, but they say, I couldn't find any bad reviews on you guys.
Right.
So
win. Yeah.
Had to be doing something right.
Yeah.
And it's true. There's so much information out there for them to find, and they're going to use it.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I want to go over to the third R, which is recognition practices. How do you cultivate a culture of appreciation within your team, ensuring that your employees feel valued and acknowledged?
Well, I think we have some of the, the normal programs. A lot of carriers probably do driver of the month type stuff, monthly lunches with safety meetings, those types of things. But the fun ones are when you just randomly do something. Looks like we got a handful of drivers coming in the office today. You know what? Go get some ice cream, or let's do some burgers real quick, or stuff like that. Yeah. And you always encourage the office staff to make sure they're participating in these events, because those are the walls that we work so hard to break down, right? Between the office and the drivers. And they see that if the office team isn't sitting down next to a driver during lunch and commingling and stuff, then the drivers notice that kind of stuff and they don't feel part of the team. But we do lots of silly stuff around here. We just look for opportunity to celebrate.
Yeah. In a way, it's kind of like a, spot bonus, if you will, if in the corporate world, right? Where it's unexpected. People typically know their quarterlies in their year end, but when you go above and beyond to honor certain members of the team, whether it's ice cream, whether it's a little bit, a $20 Visa card, right? It just really builds that extra morale, I think, within a company so that the drivers do feel recognized. There was a recent study out that the top 3 reasons why drivers stay with carriers, the number 1 was praise and recognition. Right. Number 2 was pay. Number 3 was home time. And we all know not every carrier can do home time. Pay is pretty comparable across the board, but it comes down to praise and recognition.
So I just, last week I recorded a new podcast on my show, and it'll come out here in a couple of weeks, but it was really talking about, let's help you find the right carrier. If you're a driver and you're out looking, let's try to help you find the right one and approach it in a different way. And I know you can talk to any recruiter across America. It's like, what's the first question out of the driver's mouth, right? What's it pay? So I was trying to kind of flip that on them and say, listen, I know you want to ask that question. And I provided them with a PDF download in the show notes for it and stuff. But I says, what if I told you there's 50 other questions you need to ask that recruiter to get a real good feel about the company and where you're going? And pay is going to be the last one we ask. So I hope it gets a lot of listens and stuff, because I think there's a lot to it. If we've been in the industry a long time, the execs out there know there's only so much money in the pay or the driver pool.
There's only so many ways you can slice and dice the pie, right?
Yeah. And when it comes down to it, we almost all pay similar wages to drivers. So then what becomes the difference maker, right? Well, it's those things just like you were talking about. It's how you treat them. It's what's going on in the office, how you make them feel. So that's how you can put yourself on top as a carrier, is focus on some of those soft things like that.
While we're on theme of your podcast, Andrew, I was a guest on the podcast back in January, and it was an absolute blast. And again, you were the one that really got me going with this podcast here at KJ.
Crazy idea, right?
I know. I have to say, Tracy Winkler, I have to shout out you. She definitely gets us excited about these opportunities and kind of politely forces us to do them all.
She's got her ways, that's for sure. Right?
She has amazing ways, that lady. But Andrew, can you talk a little bit about your podcast, Driven Too Far?
Yeah, so we launched a podcast last November called Driven Too Far, The Truth About Trucking.
Yeah.
And when we were considering doing a podcast, we're a small fleet, so we have 75 trucks. And, initially I'm thinking that I don't know that it makes sense to do a podcast for a small fleet like that. When you think about the production costs and stuff like that, I said, I want to do something different. I want to take my experience, starting as a driver, moving my way up through the ranks over the years, and now being an executive. What have I learned, and how can I share that with drivers to make their lives better? So that's really the focus of the podcast. I try to kind of pull back the curtain, so to speak. I want drivers to understand the decisions that go beyond, behind the scenes at the truck line, what's really going on in that office space. It's not all the conspiracy theory that you hear about sometimes. So we just try to expose things to driver. In each episode, we try to come up with something that's a learning opportunity for them, so they have a better understanding of the industry and how they can become more successful in the industry.
Yeah. And you and I were talking briefly right before we started this, and we're both similar in the way that we have passions overall for the industry. And that's a beautiful thing. That's probably why we get along so well. But, from where your stance is, there is so much negative, talk and things that have happened in the industry. And, that's just the media in general, right? No one reports on the good news. Right. They report on the bad. And so I absolutely love that you're bringing that to drivers, especially with the younger generation of drivers that are coming into the workforce, and being able to expose. We're finding too, a lot of younger generation of drivers, they may have not historically have had family members that were truck drivers themselves, where 20 years ago, a lot of folks that, maybe on their way to retirement, their father was a driver, their uncle was a driver, right? And so they understood what it was. And so your podcast is really bringing light to, there's things, that might not be great, but here's what's good. This is the industry, 76 about eat, drink, sleep on, it comes on a truck. It's not going anywhere. And there's opportunities from just starting your career at a CDL drive, or starting as a warehouse worker, getting your CDL and, running a trucking company, just like you're doing.
One of the things that I saw when we started the podcast too was I was new to flatbed when I came to Chief, so I had to learn the flatbed world. And one of the things I did is I joined a couple flatbed trucking groups on Facebook. And I'm quiet. I just kind of sit back and watch and see what's going on, try to get a pulse for the industry, what's happening. And this is drivers in this group. And the one thing I kept seeing was you would get somebody new to the industry, and they really just had an honest question about how should I secure this load? And they would ask it on the Facebook, and they would just get slammed with all these negative comments by drivers about how dumb they are. And it's horrible. So that was a part of the podcast too. It's like, gosh, where are these guys going to go to get some truthful information, or at least somebody willing to help them in some way and not get treated like that? So that's the other thing we're trying to do with the podcast is, give them an avenue where they can maybe find some honesty in the industry.
Yeah. And learn what's there's, like we said, there's always going to be some things that are wrong within certain positions, within certain industries that are challenging, right? And we're in trucking, so there's challenges on the day-to-day basis. But there's also a lot of good in giving them a solution and giving them opportunity to listen to experts in the field that have done it. They've pounded the pavement themselves, and that's phenomenal. And so the podcast is Driven Too Far. Where can viewers find that podcast? I'll also link it into the show notes as well.
It's on every major platform. So it's on Apple, Spotify,
right.
all those kind of things. So it's out there, just Driven Too Far, the truth about trucking.
Love it. Love it. And I just want to wrap up with one final question. What is the most important lesson you've learned over your career?
I think it's easily about the people and stuff. I remember when I was young in my career and I was in the office, and I'm kind of a numbers geek. So I would sit there and study the numbers, and it's easy to look at the numbers and try to figure, oh, we need to do this different to fix our business. But that didn't connect it with the people that had to execute those things. And once you learn that, that's kind of where I ended up with a people first mentality, I think. Is the numbers are certainly important, and they definitely do need to guide your business. But man, if you don't have the people, you're not going to get very far.
No, not at all. You're going to be pretty stuck pretty quickly. And it's all about the people. And that's why I love talking to you, Andrew. You bring so much great energy and the honest truth about how to grow and lead a company. And, clearly you're doing that with Chief Carriers, and it's fantastic always speaking to you. So thank you so much for being on the show today. And I will be putting your contact information in the show notes. So if anyone would like to reach out to Andrew, please feel free to do so.
Thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
Talk to you soon.